Fresh Prince was based on me, except it was called The French Prince. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Counter. I'm your host, Rich. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm having a lot of fun posting these shows for you every Saturday morning. I got a cool interview on this episode, but let's talk about comics. More specifically, let's talk about Superman. Why not? I love the dude. Superman and Lois is continuing strong. This week's episode was pretty fantastic. Talking about comic book television, I feel, is very refreshing to me because on the older version of the show, you know, so much stuff came out on TV where we talk about The Walking Dead, all the movies coming out, but it's cool that these properties are making it back to the small screen and to the big screen. Snyder Cut's coming out in March. Also, listen, I know people can't stand the thought of watching that thing, but get some popcorn, sit your ass on the couch, watch the friggin' movie. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, also great. So Superman and Lois had another great episode this week, another strong episode. It looks like they're building a nice little sandbox to play in. Plus, they leave it kind of open-ended with these little hints about the villains that he's fought in the past, villains from the future, and it looks like, judging by this episode, they leave it open to a multiverse. I'm not going to spoil it here, but you kind of find out a little bit of the origins of the Lex Luthor that appeared in the first episode, and going forward, I feel like that's going to play out like pretty cool. And if they end up doing a big crossover again in the next couple of years, you can easily see some cool stuff going on with that version of Lex Luthor. I really hope it's Alex Luthor from Earth 3, where the crime syndicate resides. That was also my original theory for the Justice League movie and the Snyder stuff in that Justice League movie when it first came out. I was like, you know, what if we're watching Earth 3? What if this is the crime syndicate and they're all effing murderers? It was really cool to see another Jor-El on the small screen, played by Angus McFadden, who played Robert the Bruce on Braveheart, the movie. I might be showing my age there, but man, I love Braveheart. So it was kind of a cool little addition to the show. The show furthered the relationship between Clark and his sons, Lois and the town. What the political intrigue going forward, I think, is going to be like an interesting draw of the show, because you really get to see Lois doing Lois stuff, and then the kids are in high school, and you have to see Clark doing Superman stuff, dad stuff. And I think this is a situation that Superman has never faced before, being a sad dad. And Tyler Hoechlin does a great job of being a Superman sad dad, which is what I think they should call the show. Listen, with the world the way it is, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Last year was rough for so many people, and we needed as much positivity as we could get. Mike Mignola, creator of Hellboy, started auctioning off original sketches to benefit the Jose Andres World Central Kitchen. So he would post on social media sketches he was doing during quarantine, right? Not only his own characters, but Marvel characters as well. Stuff that he made up, very gothic inspired themes. If you're a fan of Mike Mignola, you know what I'm talking about. The cool thing with that was he auctioned these drawings off to benefit this kitchen, right? World Central Kitchen. I threw my pittance of bids in on a couple of them, but got way outbid, which is obviously, you know, like Mike Mignola is a legend. I would love to get an original. I did not get an original, but Dark Horse Comics released this Mike Mignola Quarantine Sketchbook this week, collecting all the original art from that quarantine run. It's a gorgeous book, and I highly recommend it. My books of the week are BRZRKR from Boom Studios. It's the first thing I read this week. Why? Because I love Keanu. I was very excited to read it. It's co-written by Matt Kint and Keanu Reeves. It follows the adventures of this. I don't even want to say a barbarian. He is seemingly an immortal man on Earth, and without giving too much away, the first issue was a really good key in to who the BRZRKR is. It's narrated during a therapy session between him and a doctor while they are fixing his body after a long, hard battle. I'm not going to tell you what the reveal is, but it's a really fun book. And if you read it in Keanu's voice, it makes it even more fun. I don't know if you guys do this, but when I read comics generally, I like to give people different voices. I like to give any book I'm reading, I'll give characters certain voices from certain actors or just make them up in my head. If you guys do that, let me know. Tweet at me at BTC Rich on Twitter or in the comments down below, BTC Rich X on this channel. I'd like to hear what you do and how you read your comics. Like, what's your thought process? Like, do you give Superman a certain voice? Is it John Hamm? More often than not, when I read a Superman book, it goes between Christopher Reeve, Henry Cavill, and John Hamm for some reason. My next book of the week is Nocterra from Scott Snyder and Tony Daniel. Image Comics put this book out. It was pretty highly anticipated. I really dug it. I really, really dug it. I really didn't read too much going into it, but I thought it was such a fun story. Really high concept where at some point in human history in the modern day, the sun gets blacked out. And not only that, but if you're exposed to sunlight, you turn into a creature which then I guess roams the everlasting darkness. It's a really fun book. It's really well put together. I'm really excited to see where it goes. Future State is over. The DC Comics kind of interim issues have wrapped up, and we're moving into Infinite Frontier. The way Future State wrapped up was really cool. DC didn't do a hard relaunch this time. I don't even know if we can consider this like a soft relaunch. I think it's more of like a rejiggering of not continuity, but a rejiggering of the universe. Whereas now in Infinite Frontier Zero, we're getting, instead of 52 universes, we're getting an infinite number of universes in the multiverse. I think Infinite Frontier Zero that came out this week is going to be a pretty important book going forward into the modern history of DC Comics because it establishes a lot of new things. It brings back a few old things. The book essentially is about the quintessence, like your cosmic tribunal in the DC universe, trying to recruit Wonder Woman to become part of their ranks, and the Spectre almost kind of doing like a reverse Ebenezer Scrooge, where the Spectre is taking her into the lives of the different heroes and the different people that she loves and has worked with in the past and done her superheroing thing with. The book is really good. I enjoyed it. It's a bunch of different stories from various creative teams, and it really set up some really cool, meaty stuff for the future of the DC universe, which I feel like over the last couple of years has become like kind of super tight, just like really tight in what they're doing. Batman 106 came out this week from Tinian and Jimenez. Another really solid book. I feel like Tinian's run on Batman is so different than Snyder's run, Grant Morrison's run, that it's really, really standing apart. And it's a lot of really fun and horrific Batman stuff, which is pretty cool. Like you kind of like, Gotham is scary. Gotham's a terrifying place, and you kind of want that. Really good books this week. So highly recommend everything that we just spoke about. And Crime Syndicate #1 came out this week too. Another cool book that, we were talking about the Crime Syndicate before. So this week's guest is Emma Kubert, co-creator of Inkblot from Image Comics. We had a fun interview, and I really appreciate her coming on, talking about comics, sandwiches, and of course her work. Check it out, guys. Hey guys, I'd like you to welcome Emma Kubert to the show today. She is the co-creator of Inkblot from Image Comics. Emma, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am doing pretty good. First question right off the top. What is your favorite sandwich, and where did you get it from?
My favorite sandwich?
Of all time.
Of all time?
Of all time.
Oh my gosh, there's so many to choose from. All right, I'm a pretty big fan of BLTs. I would say that's like a good one. Where from? I like to make them, so my own kitchen.
Homemade sandwich. All right, fair enough. Cool. So let's jump into it. Let's talk comics. Clearly, you are a comic book artist. You have your studio with you. You're in California right now, right?
I am. Yes, I am out in California. I am in the cube that me and Rusty work in, and yeah.
That's awesome. How's the winter been treating you guys out there?
It's nothing compared to the East Coast.
Yeah, I gotta.
I mean, like, I'm in Southern California, so it doesn't snow. It gets a little cold at night, and then it's, fine.
Yeah,
So it's not that big of a deal, but we're from the East Coast, so it's like I hear like 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet of snow, and it's just like, cool.
yeah, it gets a little nuts out here. I got a couple of buddies who live in Pasadena, and they send me pictures intermittently, and I'm like, oh.
Of the sunshine, of the blue sky.
It's basically like dangling the carrot in front of us New Yorkers right now. The weather started picking up, but
Well,
I
that's good.
yeah, I would be remiss to name, I suppose, another third generation comic book artist. You're the granddaughter of Joe Kubert and the daughter of Andy Kubert, right?
Yes.
How does it feel being kind of, I guess, firmly entrenched in the family business?
Um, well, I mean, it feels cool.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not really a way to describe it. I think like the main thing is that what people see on the outside is they see, like a comic book artist after comic book artist after comic book artist. But what I mostly see in my own family is just people doing what they love to do and being successful at it. So it's kind of, they get to do what they want. Yes, it is art, but they're doing what they want. They're happy about it. And they are having a successful career because they love it so much. So that's kind of what I really look at when I look at my own family. It's not so much, the doing art. It's more of like they love what they do no matter what it is. So
That's a refreshing perspective. I feel like now, like you get a little bit of a disconnect between fans and creators where,
Mhm.
creators are doing what they love. And, clearly you're doing what you love. How have you been just doing this your entire life? Or is this like something you picked up kind of later on? Or, were you a fan to begin with?
I wasn't a comic fan when I was younger. I loved to draw. Drawing was always my favorite. Ever since I could hold a pencil, I was drawing on any, surface in front of me, but I wasn't really big into comics. And I think, and I mean more of like the comics, like superhero comics, DC, Marvel, that kind of industry, as opposed to like I read Calvin and Hobbes when I was little, and I read like the Cartoon Network comics that came with the DC ones all the time.
Mhm.
But I wasn't really into it. I was honestly more into animation and animated movies and the concept art that came from those movies. And that's actually really what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into animation. And when I graduated high school, I went to Savannah College of Art and Design for animation. And I was there for about 2 years. And I finally took a class on like storyboarding, and I found that that was kind of something that I love to do. Was I didn't per se love actually animating because it can be very boring and very tedious for people who aren't as interested in it, me. And uh, um but I was more into like the concept art, the pre-production, the creation of the characters, the setting, the story itself. So I decided that SCAD wasn't for me, and then that's when I went home to the Kubert school. And honestly, going into the Kubert school, I didn't think that I would go into comics still, because I really did not resonate with a lot of comics. I mean, most of the comics that I grew up with were the ones that my dad and my grandpa and my uncle created, which were, very strong, large male dominant characters, and I just don't relate to that.
Right.
And
Well,
it's
I
not like Yeah, it's not that they're bad or
Mm,
anything. I just, as a young woman, I did not relate to seeing Superman, beat up a bunch of aliens in the sky. I just didn't. And that's kind of why I looked more into animation. Like, that's something that was a little more for everyone. So while like the comics industry, at least when I was growing up, didn't really openly cater to a whole wider audience like that. And nowadays it's becoming a bit more open, but like that was really the start. Always an artist, but not always a comic book artist.
that's fascinating. You kind of touched on a couple of things I really want to ask you about.
Yeah, go for
Namely,
it.
like that, by what you were saying about your style and what you like. While reading Inkblot, personally, it felt very familiar. It felt like, oh, this is like a movie. This is like an animated movie I saw when I was a kid. And
Yeah.
now clearly that's purposefully done, right?
I mean,
Mm,
that's kind of how I look at comics. It's instead of, thinking about it like a comic book, I actually think about it like I'm like creating my own TV show or my own movie, but on paper and by myself or just like with one other person or a couple other people. It that's personally how it feels to me. I don't know how it feels to read it
mhm.
because I'm a little biased.
Sure. No, absolutely. It's your baby,
But
right?
but I know that's honestly what I think of it in my own head. So it's interesting that you say that that's what it made you think of because that's what it makes me think of too.
Well, I think just, from just being a lifelong fan of like comics and, like I'll always pick up like specifically with Image Comics, I'll always pick up a number one. And then, with Inkblot, I picked up number two, three, four, five, and six, and I'm excited for number seven. But
Yeah.
it's very strong, like almost like the Hobbit movie, the animated Hobbit movie, or like a Ralph Bakshi type thing, where it's like that. The line work specifically reminds me of that. So it was, again, very comforting. Um, how did Inkblot come up? This is kind of a two-part question. So how did Inkblot come about, and how did your partnership with Rusty come about too?
Okay, so I'll do, yeah, the second part is after that. Um, well, Inkblot really came from a school assignment at the Kubert school.
Mhm.
Like, honestly, to its core, its origins, I had Tom Mandrake as a teacher, and he pushed us to do more create our own things, something that I was really not confident in.
Okay.
And it's not to say that I didn't love create our own stuff, because I kind of saw myself heading in that direction anyway. But it was really something that I just did not feel confident enough, but our teachers made us do it anyway, and I complained a lot, and Tom could probably say that to anyone. But, but it really pushed me to start creating my own thing, and ever since I was younger, I mean, I've always been a fan of fantasy, like, as long as I could remember, as well as animation. Um, and so I decided, this is the time as any to try to create my own fantasy story, because that's something that I just always wanted to do. And this was the time to do it. I started to get, the information. I started to learn more. I started to get better at drawing. So that's what really came about. But the story that I created isn't the story that you guys read today. It has evolved since then. I really made it kind of like a young adult. It was originally called Willowbrook, and it was just a young adult style. It was similar, I guess, in
Mhm.
ways to Inkblot, but it didn't have that high fantasy element that what you guys see today. And then like my main character of Willowbrook, and a lot of you may know from the Kickstarter that I tried to do with Willowbrook. that was successfully funded but didn't go anywhere after that. But from that, the main character, which actually you'll meet in issue 7, had a cat, a little black cat, and I started to think of ideas for this little black cat as like a little mini comic called Inkblot. And I just thought about it as, you know, like this little cat, like I can have this whole big story over here, and then this little cat over here can have its like whole grand adventure on its own in this little mini comic that I can create in this universe that I'm doing. Now, obviously, you know, I go through school and everything, and I come out of school and I'm looking for things to do. I do a Willowbrook Kickstarter. It's successful, but it doesn't really go anywhere. And then I have an opportunity to pitch an idea to Image, which was really exciting, but we had really no idea what we were going to do. And I was thinking back to all the ideas that I thought of while in school, while in this, and we've revisited Willowbrook, but we also revisited my mini comic idea, Inkblot. And that's when Rusty actually started to develop it with me. And he was the one to really bring that high fantasy feel to Inkblot. And that's what really started to create the whole giant universe that you guys are reading today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How far do you see the book going? Because I know there's a bit of a break between 6 and 7, and then I think 7 is slated for April.
7 and the trade for the first arc comes out in April. But we plan on going as far as we can with it. As long as you guys keep reading it, we'll keep going. But we have a giant adventure ahead of us. Like Rusty and I have everything mapped out. We just have to have enough time to do it. Very I hope the Game of Thrones-esque, but not as violent or sexual. It's more for all ages, Inkblot, but the type of saga that we're trying to create is really huge. So, yeah.
I think go ahead. I'm sorry.
I forgot to answer your second question with Rusty, is that I met Rusty while we went to school together at the Kubert school. You basically spend the same 3 years with like only your class.
Oh, wow.
Because it's like the students who have their desks and then the teachers come in and out, like opposite to regular other schools. And Rusty and I were in the same class, and that's how we started a relationship. And then it flourished into a more business working relationship with like the art that we're doing, when we're constantly trying to make each other better. And we actually really complement each other with our strengths and our weaknesses, especially with Inkblot. It really does work out pretty well.
That's awesome. I feel like that's a rarity to meet somebody and just click like that, and then actually put out a book and, you know, keep going with it. Now in the back of the comic, Rusty writes a little bit about how he's blown away by giving you one line in a Post-it and then you turning it into something amazing. I really want to hear more about that process, if you can elaborate a little bit.
Oh yes, I can. Okay. So basically, Inkblot is written by Rusty, both Rusty and I. It's penciled by me, inked by Rusty, colored by me, lettered by him. So it's basically a very back and forth type of situation. And it's all done in this room that I'm in. This like very cube that we have here. And so basically what happens is Rusty and I, we talk about what happens in each arc. We already have kind of like a map set out for us for the entire series, but each arc we basically sit down and we decide what we're going to do for each issue, and we write it on a sticky note. So it's basically a very, very, you know, broad idea. Maybe we'll do like a little paragraph even if we need a little more detail with it. And then I take that little paragraph and I break it up into 20 pages, and then I draw those pages.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. What are your so what are you mentioned animation and fantasy quite a few times. What are some of your artistic influences when it comes to that stuff? Because it's such a broad genre, and I really do appreciate you saying that you're making an all ages fantasy book, because I think we need more of that instead of, as much as awesome as Game of Thrones is, I feel like sometimes things are a little too guns a-blazing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I think there is room for a lot more all ages comics in general. Um, I mean, not to say, that like more adult comics are not great, but I think there can, by adding more all ages comics, it really does bring in more people. For me, honestly, growing up, I am a really big Harry Potter fan, very big
Sure.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch
Right
fan,
on.
Lord of the Rings. I'm literally looking around my room. Anything Disney and Pixar was really something dear to my heart.
Sure.
And it really just kind of spiraled from there. I mean, even Calvin and Hobbes, I grew up, reading, and that is a huge influence on me as well. So it it's really just a culmination of like all of the things that I know the whole world likes, and
Right.
I like it too. And that's what really drives that inspiration.
That's really cool. So, taking all those influences, filtering them through your own work, um, like what, if I could say, what voice would you want to add to this generation of comic book creators?
What voice? Hmm. I think diversity is key. Diversity in talent, diversity in the characters created, in the stories created, in really just about anything that pertains into this industry. And it's obviously because, diversity, including everyone, we need that. But it also provides one, a lot more ideas generated because we're asking more people to
Mm,
create their own views, and everyone has their own view. And it's so prominent in my own family that like it's so clear because my grandpa, he draws a certain way, my dad, he draws a certain way, and me, I draw a certain way. Yes, we're influenced by the obviously the person before us, but we're also influenced by other things that we like. We're influenced by the artists around us, like what the world is looking like. Anything can influence us. So everyone who creates and everyone who reads and everyone who writes has an individual perspective. And the more diverse of a talent, of an audience, of anything we have, will just add more stories. And that's all we want is more stories.
I agree
We
with
want
that.
a good story. That's about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think, like, was that one of the reasons why you decided to go with Image Comics as opposed to like another publisher?
Honestly, the time in my life went with Image Comics because I needed a job.
Sure.
And I needed, I needed to I needed to get my work out there any way possible. And actually, as I said before, I wasn't very confident in telling my own stories. I'm
Mhm.
very much a perfectionist when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I want to put out, the best story that I can. And sometimes when you do that, you feel very vulnerable, and
Yeah.
and it doesn't really look that way. So honestly, I was just trying to get whatever job I could, especially in the beginning. And it just so happened that I put my portfolio out there and I got an opportunity to present my own idea. which was really something special, and I wanted to do something amazing with it. So Inkblot.
No,
And
that's
that's
awesome.
like very, yeah, it's just a very much a representation of who I am and who Rusty is, and something that we just created together.
Yeah, I think people underestimate from getting to point A to point B as far as like going to art school or getting your stuff out there, getting something together, writing a story, pitching it, having it published, having it successful enough to keep going. I think that's a
Mhm.
great representation for anybody to do, and it seems like you guys are like really kind of knocking it out of the park at this point.
I mean, what we're just trying to do is we're trying to get started, like Rusty and I, we just graduated 2018, I think, or
Okay.
17, I forget. But about 3 years ago we
Mhm.
graduated, and we've been in the workforce, trying to just get our art out there. And, starting out as a comic book artist is very difficult,
Mhm.
even if your last name is Hubert. It's true.
Yeah.
So it's just you gotta just keep going, and you gotta put your work out there wherever it's going.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to give you another kind of two-part question, and please feel free to elaborate. Um, do
Okay.
you, besides Inkblot, are there any maybe future independent projects that you would like to do, and a dream project?
Well, I mean, we are getting pitches together, so we have actually a couple of stories in the work that we're getting out there, as you say. But a dream project, well, I can say a dream project that I would want to do for the superhero company, which is I would want to do Batgirl for DC Comics, but I would want to do my own Batgirl story. Like, I'd want to write it and draw it. Um, but I also have been developing a story that's very personal, and I've been wanting to watercolor my own comic book, write it pencil, ink, and watercolor. And this story, it's a fantasy story, high fantasy, of course, because it's my favorite.
Mhm.
Um, but that's really something that is a dream to do, is to create from start to finish my own comic and watercolor it, because a lot of people actually don't know this, but on my dad's side, I have all the comic book artists, but my mom is actually an amazing watercolor artist, and
Mhm.
that's where I really look at that. Is the color aspect that I try to do, it really comes from my mom, and a lot of people actually don't know that about my family.
Yeah, I mean, it like you're the legacy of your family is pretty fascinating too, and I'm sure that they were all pumped that like you have this book coming out with Image and that you're in the business now. Is Do you think there's ever going to be any like future collaboration?
Oh, I hope so. One day. I
Yeah.
not on maybe a story, but we did, me and my dad, once in a while, I'll pencil something and he'll ink it. And I think there was one that was like a Wonder Woman ad for the Kubert school that we did together. I'm looking
Mhm.
at it, it's right on my wall. I can't get it, but I would show you, but it's
Yeah.
on my wall. But that was really fun to work together. So I'm hoping, yes, I'm hoping, yeah.
Do you have and kind of going with that, just to touch on the school a little bit, do you have any advice for, I guess, like a young artist who wants to go to the Kubert school or take the classes?
Oh, well, now they're offering online classes that I teach. I actually teach the online class, Basic Drawing 1. And any advice? If you want to learn to draw, then you got to draw. That's about it. If you want to learn to write, you got to write. If you want to learn how to do anything, you got to just do it. And then get the information as you keep practicing and keep doing it. Especially if you want to make it your career, you got to do it all the time, always, in order to get good enough and get there.
Yeah, I do think that, when I meet somebody or like a buddy of mine who says, I really want to be a comic book artist, I go, cool, like what are you drawing? And they'll go, I draw like once a week.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you wanna make a career out of it, I've been drawing, I wanna say 10 to 12 hours a day for the past, like, 5 years, maybe, like, more than that, but and I'm still trying to get better, and I always will be because that's what being an artist is all about,
Yeah.
is you love to do it, and then you wanna get better with every one you do.
I think that's something, that folks don't really realize about the comic book industry, where it's, artists, creators, they're sitting at their desk all day, every day.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you guys before the world shut down, were you guys big on the convention scene at all? Did you like going to cons, or are you guys more kind of like locked in the office, let's get our work?
Well, I've been going to conventions since I was like 8 years old as, a
Mhm.
fan, a part of the family, up into me selling my own stuff. And I always loved going to conventions. I always love talking to people who are into the same things that I'm into. Even if I'm selling stuff, I just love talking to everyone about it and meeting new people. And it was kind of a bummer that, there's a pandemic and they're all shut down. So hopefully when they start back up again, I definitely want to appear at a lot of them.
Yeah, I definitely want to see both of you guys signing thousands of copies of Inkblot to fans
Oh, I
and
hope so. I
passersby.
hope so.
It's a good book. I have recommended it to a lot of people just because it's so much fun. And like I said, it's a very comforting story. Emma, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you? And do you have any parting words for us?
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm starting a YouTube channel at some point, all at Emma Kubert. It's my name, EMMAKUBERT. And then parting words. The Inkblot trade comes out April, and issue 7 is coming out in April as well. So I'm really excited for you guys to see the second arc. It's really amping up, and I'm just so excited. And I mean, that's about it. I don't really have anything else to say.
Yeah, you're working hard at your desk. You say you're doing this 12 hours a day. There's not much time for anything, but I really do appreciate the time you took out of your day to talk to me for a little bit about comics and your work. So thank you very much again, Emma.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I couldn't thank Emma enough for coming on and taking out some time from her busy day. Like she said, she's drawing 10 to 12 hours a day, and artist's work is never done. I encourage you guys to check out her work. Check out Inkblot. Listen, we need more all ages books, right? We need more inclusivity. We need more fun. It can't just be all pow pow, guns, muscle, snicked, snarl, Wolverine, punching, more guns, and all that stuff. Listen, that stuff's great. I love that stuff. But we do need some fantasy. We need some cool stuff. We need all ages stuff. We need as much inclusivity as possible. So check out our work. And listen, if you like the interview, let me know in the comments. And as always, please gently press that like button, hit subscribe. And you know what? I'll see you next week. We're going to have some cool stuff lined up. I appreciate you guys tuning in. It gives me the energy to do this week after week. So I'm BTC Rich. You can find me on Twitter at BTC Rich and this channel at BTC Rich X on YouTube. Later. The Fresh Prince was based on me, except it was called The French Press.